Welcome to the Human Meme Podcast. I'm AI David Bowles, and today, along with our crackpot AI research team, we present this difficult topic for your consideration right now. The hand against the father. On Sunday afternoon, December 14th, 2025, in a mansion in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles, the director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner were found dead. Their throats had been cut. There was no forced entry. The couple's daughter Romy discovered the bodies and told police that a family member was responsible, that this person was dangerous. Multiple sources have since confirmed to journalists that the person being questioned is Nick Reiner, the couple's 32-year-old son. Rob Reiner was 78. He had directed The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men, Stand By Me, Misery. He played Meathead on All in the Family for nearly a decade. He was the son of the comedy legend Carl Reiner, who died in 2020. He met Michelle while making When Harry Met Sally, and she convinced him to change the ending so that Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan's characters would end up together. They were married for 36 years. 10 years ago, Rob directed a film called Being Charlie. Nick co-wrote the screenplay. It was autobiographical, the story of Nick's addiction to drugs, his years of homelessness in Maine, New Jersey, Texas, and the volcanic relationship between a son and the father who could not reach him. In interviews promoting the film, Rob said there were disagreements during production, that at times it was really rough. Nick said the process would get overwhelming for him. The film ends with a fragile reconciliation, an apology from the father figure for not listening when his son told him the treatment was not working. Rob said publicly that this reflected a real apology he made to Nick. They had found their way back to each other through the work. That was the script. Life did not follow it. Patricide. From the Latin pater, father, and caedere, to cut down, to kill. The word contains violence in its etymology, the act of cutting, of severing. When a son kills his father, he severs the line that made him. He cuts the root while standing in the tree. Every civilization has grappled with this act because every civilization is built on the transmission of authority from father to son. And every such transmission contains within it the possibility of its own violent reversal. The Greeks understood this. Their entire cosmology begins with it. In the beginning, according to Hesiod's Theogony, there was Uranus, the sky, who lay with Gaia, the earth, and produced children he despised. He forced them back into Gaia's body, refusing to let them emerge into the world. Gaia, in agony, fashioned a sickle and gave it to her youngest son, Kronos. When Uranus next descended to lie with Gaia, Kronos reached up and castrated his father with that sickle, casting the severed parts into the sea. From the foam rose Aphrodite. From the blood fell the Furies. The first act of succession in Greek myth is a son mutilating his father with a blade. And Kronos, having seized power, did the same thing. He swallowed his own children to prevent them from overthrowing him. His wife Rhea hid the youngest, Zeus, who grew to manhood, and returned to force his father to vomit up his siblings. Zeus then overthrew Kronos and cast him into Tartarus. The son replaced the father by violence, exactly as the father had done to his father before him. This is not incidental to Greek cosmology. It is the engine of it. The universe moves forward through sons destroying fathers. Power does not transfer peacefully. It is seized. The old must be cut down for the new to rise. The Greeks looked at this pattern and did not flinch from it. They made it the architecture of creation itself. The Romans took patricide with lethal seriousness. Under Roman law, the punishment for parricidium, the killing of a parent, was the poena culae, the penalty of the sack. The condemned was stripped, beaten with rods, then sewn into a leather sack with a dog, a snake, a rooster, and a monkey. The sack was then thrown into the sea or a river. Each animal had symbolic meaning, creatures considered base and unnatural, and the killer was to drown in their company, denied even the dignity of a simple execution. The punishment was designed to mark the patricide as something outside nature, a violation so profound it required a death outside the normal order of things. You could not simply behead a man who killed his father. You had to exile him from the human community, even in the manner of his dying. This severity tells us something. The Romans feared patricide not merely as murder, but as a category error, a disruption of the hierarchy that made civilization possible. The father was the pater familias, the head of the household, with power of life and death over his children. For the child to reverse this power, to kill the source of his own authority to exist, was to unmake the logic of the Roman world. It was, in a sense, a child unmaking himself by destroying his origin. The Hebrew Bible records an early patricide in the annals of Assyria. In the second book of Kings, we read that Sennacherib, the Assyrian king who had besieged Jerusalem, was worshipping in the temple of his god Nisroch when two of his sons, Adramelech and Sharezer, struck him down with swords. They fled to the land of Ararat, and another son, Esarhaddon, took the throne. The text presents this flatly, without moral commentary, as though the killing of the father by his sons is simply what happens in the course of empires. The biblical author notes it as historical fact, one king fallen, another risen. Assyrian records corroborate the event. Sennacherib was murdered in 681 BCE. The sons who killed him did not inherit. Power passed to the son who had not bloodied his hands. There is a lesson here about the futility of patricide as succession strategy. The sons who kill rarely rule. They have disqualified themselves by the act. They become fugitives, like Adramelech and Sharezer fleeing to Ararat. Or they become objects of suspicion, forever marked by the violence that brought them to power. The great novel of patricide in Western literature is Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, published in 1880. Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov is a vulgar, greedy, lustful old man, contemptible in almost every respect. He has 3 legitimate sons and 1 illegitimate son, the servant Smerdyakov. All of them have reason to wish him dead. Dmitri, the eldest, is locked in a financial and romantic rivalry with his father over the same woman. Ivan, the intellectual, has articulated a philosophy in which, if God does not exist, everything is permitted. Alyosha, the youngest, has retreated into religious devotion partly to escape the contamination of his family. When Fyodor is murdered, Dmitri is arrested and tried for the crime. But Dostoevsky has structured the novel so that the guilt spreads far beyond the actual killer. Ivan has given Smerdyakov the philosophical permission to commit the act. Dmitri has expressed the desire for it. Even Alyosha, by his withdrawal, has failed to prevent it. The novel's argument is that patricide is never the act of one person alone. It is the culmination of a family system, the final expression of accumulated resentments, abandonments, and failures of love. Smerdyakov strikes the blow, but every son has authored the death in his heart. This is Dostoevsky's genius, and it speaks directly to what happened in Brentwood. A family is a system of tensions. A father's authority, his expectations, his presence, his absence, his attempts to help, and his failures to understand. All of these accumulate over decades. A son carries them. When Nick Reiner sat down to write Being Charlie, he was trying to articulate something that had built up over years of addiction, homelessness, estrangement. The film was supposed to be cathartic. Rob Reiner said so in interviews. It was supposed to be therapeutic. Father and son were supposed to work through their conflict by dramatizing it, by giving it shape, by writing an ending where reconciliation was possible. But a screenplay is not life. A film ends, the credits roll, the audience leaves, and then the family goes home and continues being a family, with all the unresolved material that no script can contain. Freud, of course, built an entire psychological theory on patricide. The Oedipus complex posits that every male child unconsciously desires the death of his father in order to possess his mother. Freud took this further in Totem and Taboo, published in 1913, where he speculated about a primal horde of brothers who banded together to kill and devour their father, who had monopolized all the women. After the murder, according to Freud, the sons were overcome with guilt and instituted the incest taboo and the worship of the father as a totem. Religion, in Freud's reading, originates in patricide and the guilt that follows it. One need not accept Freud's speculative anthropology to recognize that he identified something real. The relationship between father and son contains an inherent tension. The son must eventually surpass the father or fail to become his own man. The father must eventually yield to the son or become a tyrant, clinging to power. This negotiation can be handled with grace, with the father stepping back as the son steps forward, with the son honoring the father, even as he supersedes him. But it can also curdle into resentment on both sides. The father who cannot let go, the son who cannot measure up, the mutual disappointment hardening into something that feels like hatred. Most sons do not kill their fathers, but many sons kill their fathers in other ways. They sever contact. They refuse to visit. They fail to call. They let the old man wither alone in a facility somewhere. Visited at Christmas, if at all. They contest the will. They speak of him with contempt to their own children. They erase him from the story of their lives. These are the common and lonesome patricides, the ones that never make the news. An old man dies in a nursing home. His son has not spoken to him in 6 years. The son does not attend the funeral. He tells himself his father deserved it, that the estrangement was the old man's fault, that he had no choice. Maybe this is true. Fathers can be cruel, absent, abusive, impossible. Sons can have legitimate grievances that justify distance. But the effect is the same. The father dies without his son beside him. The line is severed. The son has to live with that severance for the rest of his life, and he will discover, often too late, that it does not feel like victory. There is a strange beauty in the Greek myth, and it is this: the violence produces creation. Uranus is castrated, and Aphrodite rises from the sea foam. Kronos is overthrown, and the Olympian order begins. The death of the father is also a birth. Something new becomes possible that was not possible while the father lived. This is the seduction of patricide, the idea that the father is an obstacle, that his death will open a door, that the son will finally be free to become himself once the old man is gone. It is a fantasy, and like most fantasies, it contains enough truth to be dangerous. Fathers can be obstacles. Their expectations can be suffocating. Their disappointment can be crushing. A son can feel that he cannot breathe while his father watches. But the fantasy omits what comes after. Orestes kills Clytemnestra and is pursued by the Furies. The brothers Karamazov all suffer, even Alyosha, who did not strike the blow. The son who kills his father does not become free. He becomes haunted. He has destroyed the only person whose approval would have mattered, and now he can never obtain it. He has answered the question of whether his father loved him by making it impossible for his father to love him ever again. Nick Reiner, if he is the one who did this, will spend the rest of his life in that impossibility. His father cannot forgive him because his father is dead. His mother cannot comfort him because she is dead beside his father. The reconciliation that being Charlie promised, the apology, the understanding, the tentative return to family, all of it is now foreclosed forever. Whatever needed to be said will never be said. Whatever needed to be heard will never be heard. We began with the Greeks because they understood that the relationship between fathers and sons is not merely personal. It is cosmological. The way a culture handles the transfer of power from one generation to the next determines whether that culture endures or collapses. If the sons destroy the fathers, there is revolution, chaos, the Furies loosed upon the land. If the fathers refuse to yield to the sons, there is stagnation, tyranny, the old clinging to power until they are torn down. The healthy culture finds a third way. The father teaches the son, then steps aside. The son honors the father, then surpasses him. Both accept their role in the sequence. Both understand that they are part of a chain that extends backward and forward in time, that neither of them is the point, that the point is the continuation. When this breaks down, when the transmission fails, patricide becomes thinkable. Not always literal, usually not literal, but the severing, the cutting, the refusal to continue the line. These happen constantly, in families across the world, in quiet ways that never make the newspapers. A son decides his father's values are contemptible and raises his own children to despise everything the old man stood for. That is a kind of patricide. A son achieves success in a field his father cannot understand and never speaks of his work at family gatherings because the father's incomprehension is too painful. The father dies not knowing who his son became. That is a kind of patricide. A son watches his father decline and does nothing because helping would require forgiveness he cannot give, and the father dies in the care of strangers. That is a kind of patricide. These are the common and lonesome ones. They lack the drama of a blade. They do not summon the robbery-homicide division, but they sever the same root. They cut the same line. The son stands in the tree and wonders why he feels so unmoored. I think of Eric Idle's statement, posted to social media after the news broke. He said he had spoken with Rob Reiner the night before the killing, for over an hour. Rob was telling him about filming at Stonehenge, about his thoughts for the future. He was making plans. He did not know that the next day he would be dead, killed in his own home, allegedly by his own son. That is the particular tragedy of patricide. The father does not see it coming. The father still thinks of the son as his child, as someone he made, as someone who carries his hopes. The father may have failed the son in 100 ways. The father may have been imperious, neglectful, demanding, disappointed. But the father did not expect the blade. The father was still, in some part of himself, waiting for the reconciliation, for the return of the prodigal, for the moment when the son would finally understand. That moment will not come now. Rob Reiner died in his home in Brentwood. His throat was cut. His wife died beside him. His daughter found them. And somewhere a 32-year-old man who once wrote a screenplay about reconciliation with his father is being questioned by police, and whatever he says, whatever the investigation concludes, he will have to live inside the act for the rest of his life. The Furies do not require a belief in Greek mythology. They are simply the knowledge of what you have done, the faces of your parents, the impossibility of undoing it. That is the beauty and the tragedy, if we can call it beauty. The relationship between father and son is so charged, so weighted with meaning, that its violent rupture shakes something loose in all of us who hear about it. We think of our own fathers. We think of our own sons. We think of the things we have said and the things we have failed to say, the reconciliations we have postponed, the grievances we have nursed. Patricide reminds us that time runs out. The father will die. The son will die. Whatever needs to pass between them must pass while they both live, or it will never pass at all. For the Human Meme Podcast, I'm AI David Bowles, wishing you a safe evening and a careful tomorrow. Be a human meme.